Good.
Okay, everybody, I'm back. I'm sorry for the brief interruption. We had some technical difficulties starting the show, but we appear to be working now. I hope that you people are able to restart and get online and listen to this. If not, it will be in the archive. It's just one of those nights that technology got to us. Who knows, maybe the rain got to the technology. We're going to talk tonight about James Okon's new book. Well, I don't have that scrolled down enough to see it. The Lost Secrets of Maya Technology. I've read the book. It's very in-depth. I would have to say, in my opinion, and of course I'm no expert, that this man is something of an expert or an authority on Maya technology after reading his book. And we got a lot of things here to talk about tonight. So, James, how are you doing?
Just fine. And I'm glad to be with you tonight.
Well, I'm happy to have you here, and I apologize for the slow start, but unfortunately, I don't think any of us has full control over technology and when it's going to do a boo-boo on us. So we're going now. So let's get this here show on the road. And why not to break the ice with everybody? Don't you let everybody know, basically what got you interested in Maya technology in the book?
Well, my interest in Maya technology started when I became interested in archaeology. I think it started as a boy. I grew up here outside of Atlanta and played in the Civil War trenches and found bits of rusted armament and spent shell and shot. And that started my interest in history. Well, now it's archaeology because 50 years have passed since then. And then I had a high school teacher who taught history, but he didn't teach about Charlemagne and Napoleon and the typical kind of history. He taught about occult languages and extinct languages and lost civilizations. And that whetted my appetite for the kind of archaeology that was more mysterious, the lost civilizations like the Maya. And later I took some time off from my job after college and went to south of the border to Mexico and spent almost a year living amongst the ancient cities and amongst the people who were descendants of the Maya, and became very interested and felt a kinship to the technicians and engineers and scientists that built that great civilization that did so many things in science and in technology. So that was the beginning.
Now, I got to tell you, from reading your book, they were, real geniuses there, and they really had a unique way of surviving, but we can go into that. I was noticing here in your book, you mentioned Maya city-states. Can you tell us a little bit about them? How are they like or different from our city-states?
Well, the city-state had its most familiar location was in Italy that we could probably think of, with Venice and Florence and the big city-states that went out. And while they were in the same body of land, the Italian peninsula, they had their own entities. They had their own power and their own political realm. The Maya did it the same way. They had about 50 different city-states that had their own polities, their own area. They're big cities with the hinterlands, with the agricultural areas around them. And the reason they lasted for nearly 3,000 years as a civilization is that I think these city-states were independent entities, not really big, maybe 40, 50, 100 square miles in area, and they counterbalanced each other. And nobody ever became really big and took over all the rest of the guys like the Roman Empire, Egypt, the British Empire, or even the Aztecs. They stayed in balance by developing into this independent nature, this enjoyment of being having the same languages and the same cultures, almost the same languages. There were differences, and the same technology, but still having enough difference that you could tell just by the style which city a certain kind of art came from, or a different style of architecture. But I think that was what kept them as an entity for 3,000 years. Instead of somebody coming from the outside and, with the barbarians at the gate syndrome, or having them collapse from within. It lasted until Mother Nature had a big blowout in the 9th century and actually put an end to the civilization.
Yeah, I was reading about that in your book. Heck of a way to go. Especially after that long of being there. I mean, you'd think that, people would be like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah, I always thought about that. Like, this was a long drought that was the final, Mother Nature's final slam on the Yucatan. And everything was in balance. And technology brought water to the cities and storage and methodologies for agriculture that enabled them to get 4 times the yield from the land that they would get using conventional methods. And what this did was enable them to build a huge population, like 15 million people, in an area that should have been more balanced out at 2 million people. So when the big drought hit and water became scarce and then disappeared, and of course without water you don't have any agriculture, so without food and water it quickly became a disaster.
Oh yeah, a wasteland.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it wasn't a wasteland. It was like some kind of a bomb that would kill all the people, but leave all the buildings completely intact without any damage. The people abandoned the cities. Survivors went out and lived in farms and villages and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. But the cities were never reoccupied. It takes a lot of effort to run a city, and they were never occupied by any other culture. So the jungle took over their cities, and it was the only occupant there until the Maya culture was really rediscovered in the middle of the 19th century, about 1842, when John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood wrote their book about the lost civilization in Central America and Mexico.
Okay. Now, I was also going to mention to you that you mentioned in the book about their mathematical system. I was wondering if you could tell us if it was better than our mathematical system, and if so, how was it better?
Well, it wasn't better, but it was better than any other mathematical system. Better than the Romans, better than the Greeks, better than the Egyptians, because you could do all the functions with their mathematics. But it was a really brilliant system because you could do so much in such a small space. For instance, it was what's called a positional system, and only used 3 characters: a bar, a dot, and a shell-shaped symbol 0. And by the way, they invented the number 0 and used it as a mathematical number, not just a placeholder, but a mathematical number for everybody, including the Hindus who discovered it and gave it to the Arabs, who passed it on to the Europeans 900 years after the Maya had independently developed that number. But when you did Maya math, everything had to be in a whole number. And you're going, well, that's okay. And it was okay for everyday life, as long as you started with something that was a single unit or 1. But when you started calculating the periodicity of the sun around for one annual orbit for Venus or Mars or Mercury, you had to, because they didn't have decimals, you had to actually run it out to several orbits, maybe 10, 15, before you got the whole number. And then the way we got the decimal number, then when we say like 585.93 days in an orbit of Venus, well, we divide, and we have the decimal numbers, the base 10, while theirs was base 20. And that was a weakness that I see, because I'm a mathematician, but other people, if you were just doing regular math and didn't have any decimals, you could be just, if you balance your checkbook out to $1, you'd be happy, all the time. So they didn't have a decimal system, but they could multiply, divide, add, and subtract, which was with these three symbols.
Okay. And, I thought that was really pretty good, and I think the Sumerians had their own as well. But I think the Mayas had theirs first, didn't they?
It's about parallel. Sumerians were around 1600 to 2000 BC, and I didn't know this until I started getting interviews. I mean, I had to go look over the Sumerians. But that's about the time the Maya were in their pre-classic period, and they had developed mathematics, but not the zero. The zero came around 300 BC, which is about the time the Sumerians ended. But yes, and the Babylonians had a concept of zero, which was not the same as also a placeholder, like in 100 with two zeros and 1,000 with three zeros, and didn't get involved as a point of departure between positive and negative. You are in the positive numbers, you're on one side of zero as a number, and the negative numbers are in the other side of zero as a number. So yes, there were other civilizations that developed zero, but the Maya did more with it.
Okay.
Hello?
I'm still here. I'm sorry, I noticed something and I had to stop and think a minute. Okay. Now, one of the things you wrote about extensively in your book, wait a minute, sir, before we go on, I forgot to mention this earlier to the people at my website. A lot of you may not be able to get into chat. There's a whole entire new room. I had to do a last-minute emergency room from somewhere else because my web host had upgraded to PHP 5.3, and my chat room was not compatible with it, and it crashed on me. And I went and put up an emergency chat room. If you listen to this in the archives, you'll understand what's going on at that time. We're working on getting that fixed. Also, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about James and his book, they can go to www.theoldexplorer.com. And since you people are usually used to asking questions in chat, if you're listening, even though the chat room is a different one, it's 832-632-7904. And if you scroll down where the chat room used to be, the old one, you'll see what I have as new chat. You just type in a nickname into the box and then press the enter button to start chatting, and I'm already in there. So you don't need a password, you don't need a registration, just type in a nickname and hit enter and you should be in. Okay, James, I want to apologize for that. About an hour or two before I was due to call you, my web host decided to do an upgrade, and, well, you know how that's sometimes not compatible with everything.
I understand.
So, at any rate, getting back to the book where we were at, like I said, you had written extensively about their unique water system and, why it was necessary. We know from your book, they had a huge issue with water, but I thought maybe you'd like to tell my listeners in your own words about their system and why the system was necessary.
That's a good question, because in the book we talk about all these really amazing inventions like cement and the structures and their tools, but the methodology, which was a really basic need was water for drinking and water for agriculture. And they had a double whammy. They lived in an environment. A seasonal desert was caused by the dry season. So you had 6 months of really dense rain when you got, a huge amount of rain, sometimes 10 feet in that 6 months of period. And then you have barely 20% of that rain during the next 6 months. So what you find is you could actually die of thirst in the middle of a rainforest that had lots of lush plants, etc., because there was no surface water. There was no lakes or rivers. There were some, but very few. I don't want everybody to say, I remember seeing a river there, but there were very few and far between, and there was no surface water because the platform of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and Guatemala is made out of karstic limestone. It's a porous limestone. It's got like 40% porosity. So when rain would fall during the rainy season, it would go right into the ground, and it's a very thin topsoil up there, 3 feet, and then would be absorbed directly into the rocks and down into this big aquifer, this groundwater system they had. And there would be no surface water. So the only way to survive, my technicians found, and engineers, was to develop systems that collected water during the rainy season, and you could use it during the dry season. Of course, if you lived in the northern Yucatan, you had the advantage of cenotes. These are natural wells that were caused by fractures in the earth when a giant meteorite struck the Yucatan 65 million years ago. That's a famous meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. That's the theory, and it seems to be a pretty good one. But it also developed methodologies for the northern lowland Maya to live, to have water. These wells over the years, over the millions of years, dissolved the limestone and went right down into the aquifer. They could then retrieve water. Another way they did it, second, was to build underground cast-in-place concrete reservoirs called chaltuns. And they would build, each one would hold like 40,000 liters of water, and you would build as many as you needed for your city or your town. And all the buildings and all the plazas and all the hardscape, the landscape, would slope downward to these different individual collection bases called chaltuns, and they would be stored until the dry season when they were needed. And the third one was the open reservoir, where large open, let's call them lakes, were developed by collecting the water. And this was done where they actually shaped the ground in the city and sloped all the ground towards these reservoirs. And the buildings also were shaped with slopes, so that everything wound up in the reservoir. So during the dry season, this system had the ability to use check dams and flues and all kinds of other hydraulic systems to divert water into the fields so they could be used for agriculture and also used for potable water for the city. And they were very clever, and it was a brilliant system until Mother Nature came with the drought and dried everything up.
Well, the one thing that comes to my mind is they had no problem with any water going still or stagnating.
That's a good point, and I knew you'd bring that up. And they were great. With the chaltuns, you can imagine what water was like after being underground in a dark place for 6 months, and it would be pretty turbid, as it's called in the business. It would be green and brown and have all kinds of
kind of like an unclean swimming pool.
Yeah, right. Bacteria, etc., growing in them. Except it wouldn't be as green because it was all underground. So what the Maya developed were these systems of filters. They made several different kinds of filters. One would be what I call a reservoir filter. which would be like 2-foot diameter by 3 foot deep, sort of an amphora or a vessel with 2 or 3 inch walls made out of the limestone that I was referring to, the karstic limestone. As I said, it's like 40% porosity, and this simple device would drain the water through its system, and it would take out all but like a 6-micron bacteria. It wouldn't stop a virus, but they didn't have many viruses, but it would actually turn out clean water. And then there was another kind of filter called the microfilter, which, that's what I call it anyway, which was shaped like a cone or a bomb. They were 3 feet long, and they were cylindrical with a point. And they were used in series over a large pool of water, and they would drain water through the filter down into a receptacle or another pool area, and it would have taken all the turbidity out of the water, all the bacteria and all the growers and the plants, and made really clear water.
Okay, well, sounds pretty good. I mean, we're barely doing that today, ain't we?
Well, that's right. We're using systems that we're trying to clean the water. We don't clean it up as well as those water filters did, and but they are using some of the Maya routines in cities of up to 100,000. They're using water lilies as an organic plant growing in the water reservoirs like the Maya did, and they have an ecosystem that actually cleans the water by its own biotic system, which is more advanced than we could go into right now. It's a 5-minute speech, but they use water lilies and the reservoir filters and the microfilters in a brilliant way.
That sounds like they did for sure. Here's one of the first things that got my attention, even more than the water thing it did, and that really got my attention, was the fact that you said in your book they had concrete highways much like ours. Can you elaborate on that for everybody, kind of give them an idea, just how elaborate these highways were?
Well, we had the highways made of paved concrete. We had the tall buildings, multi-story buildings and pyramids. They were made with cast-in-place concrete, very similar to Portland cement that we use today. Cement is the most popular building material in the world now. And, of course, for the Maya, when they discovered this, which was like 300 BC, Europeans discovered how to make cement in 1821. It was patented in England. That's a long time. That's 2,000 years difference. And they go, well, why didn't they? Oh, wait, the Romans had it. Well, the Romans did have cement. They made it into concrete. But it was a natural cement that they dug in the ground, took from the ground in the places near Mount Vesuvius and Mount Etna, and it was a natural cement that was found there, and it lasted, well, until it ran out. And but the Maya developed a methodology by using timber into a shape, a cylindrical shape with a cylinder down the middle. I mean, a cylinder, they left a cylinder in the wood formation. They would pile up wood as a firewood and put the limestone raw material on top and set a fire into the middle of this cylinder. And it would start burning and lowering the temperature, increasing the heat. And the low temperature would draw in cool, oxygen-rich air from the outside and cause the fire to burn hotter, and then the cycle would keep repeating until flames are shooting into the air some 100 feet vertically, and the temperature grew to around 1,400 Celsius. Now, wood burns at about 400 to 500 Celsius, so they had up 3 or 4 times the burning temperature, but that was enough to cause limestone to melt, and when limestone melts and cools off, it becomes cement, clinkers. They just grind up these, or smash or ground these clinkers or masses of melted limestone, and they would have cement.
So a lot of the Giza pyramid is made out of limestone. I mean, made out of cement in its original form.
No, not Gaza, but there's an argument over that. Okay, about if they used block or they used
limestone.
But I'm talking about the Maya.
Okay, yeah. I was just making a comparison. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, no, but there's an argument going on right now about did they know how to make cement? And it's been around for a long time. And if they use a different method, they use ground limestone, which is not burned like we do ours to get cement, but they use a sort of a natural polymer they got out of the mud in the swamps to mix with the limestone to make this is a theory, okay? But I'm not an Egyptologist, so I can only tell you what I read in the archaeological news. But we'll stick to the Maya tonight.
Oh yeah.
I went a little far afield. We talked about Sumerians, but we're in the Yucatan.
Okay. Now, also another thing that you mentioned was the bridges. I wonder if you could tell us a little something about their bridges.
Well, most of my bridges were little bridges to get across streams, etc. If they had them near a city, or there were structures were made, parts of buildings or parts of the city, small bridges in architecture or in structure. But they had a couple places where they had some mid-span, 50-foot bridges, 30-foot bridges where they span with wood. But the big one, the longest bridge in the ancient world, was built by the Maya at the city of Yaxchilan across the mighty, I call it mighty because it's 300 feet wide during the dry season and 600 feet wide during the flooded rainy season. This is the Usamosita River at the city of Yaxchilan. And the cities that is located in this huge oxbow in the river. It forms a big omega. And the wide part's about 3 kilometers wide, and say it's about 2 miles. And the narrow part is a really hilly part that is only like, with the banks of each of the rivers, is 500 yards apart. So they had to find a way a lifeline across this river, which was almost impossible to cross because of the speed of the water. This is during the rainy season, flooded. Well, they had huge trees coming down the river, debris, etc. And canoes wouldn't work because of the speed of the water, etc. So they constructed, this is my first big discovery, by the way, and it sort of dovetailed with everything else. They just constructed 2 high, 75-meter tall towers and abutments on the banks, and they built a 3-span suspension bridge using rope cables. I say rope cables because they were made from the hemp or henequen rope that made the Yucatan famous around the world for supplying rope to the 17th, 18th, and 19th century till synthetics like nylon rope took over, or steel cable. And I spent several years visiting the site at Yaxchilan, doing surveys, and then going back to my office in Atlanta and running these through the computer and doing all kinds of 3D modeling until I came up with a really great solution where we had this 3-span geometry of like the Golden Gate Bridge, 2 outside spans and 1 in the middle, and I found 3 structures that were still existing that lined up perfectly. That were the bridge approach on the Grand Plaza of the city, and the 2 foundation and structures for the towers. I didn't go on the Guatemala side in that time because the Civil War was going on, and the guerrillas had planted landmines. And after a couple of people didn't believe the story, and they went over there and they didn't come back because they were blown apart. I just thought that discretion was a better part of valor, and I did not explore that side. Some people actually criticize me today for that, but I'm still got both legs. But I found the solution. I did a 3D model of it and did a fly-through with 3D dimensional aspects, flying down the river and over the bridge and meeting the king and queen. It was good enough for the History Channel to use for production, and use all my software and all my computer data. So it was a real find. But it was declared the longest bridge in the ancient world, because the longest bridge before that had been a stone structure somewhere in Europe, and the next time a bridge was longer was the center span was 63 meters. The next time a bridge was longer was 1377 in Italy, when they built a bridge across the Addo River. So I feel real comfortable that I'm proud to have had that discovery. And the great part was all the parts of the bridge were something that they had made, like the cement, like the composite structure between cement and stone, the cables and the high strength materials, etc., that they use in other parts of the bridge. I had found all these independently on other structures, but on this particular project, this big bridge project, they put it all together, and it was a mighty bridge.
Probably a project that took them a long time to put together, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I would say it taken they had to put together almost every year, because in that climate, with the rain and everything, since the ropes were made out of vegetable matter, they had to replace them every year. And I use that as the guys down in South America, because the Inca are still building those rope bridges. They don't need the towers. They just hang them from one side to the other, and they don't have the big, strong ropes. Little strong ropes. So the Maya could get by with a 6-inch diameter bundle of ropes, while the Incas have to use a 3-foot diameter bundle of ropes made from straw and grasses. So the technology of the Maya was much more advanced, because they had better materials. Maybe it's just not just the materials, it was brain power, it was their cognitive thought process that enabled them to do this.
Well, it sounds from your book like they had a lot of cognitive brain power.
And a lot of time. Remember, they started back 2000 BC, and by the turn of the millennia, first one, we went to the last one 12 years ago, but the first one, they were already, placed among the sciences and the technology that we describe in the book. And this hasn't been, it's amazing that more people, archaeologists are just picking up and realizing that the proof I have in the book about the tools and the cement and the structures and the bridge and everything are real. And even I get calls about the boats that they made, okay? And nobody's ever put this together as a single work. I will be giving a lecture a week from Monday at the Famous Explorers Club in New York. I'm really proud of that. I'm going to announce, like it hadn't been announced, I'm going to announce all these discoveries. I got them working on a PowerPoint, which is probably more splendiferous than it has to be. But hey, I'll be in the same podium that Admiral Byrd and Admiral Perry and Edmund Hillary, who climbed Everest, and Neil Armstrong and Sally Ride, the two late astronauts, stood on and talked to the same club. So I look forward to that.
Is there a website to that to their meeting, or is there people go to buy their tickets and stuff?
Yes, it's on their website right now. That's the explorer.com. Explorersclub.com. Let me look at that. Wait, I got it right here on my Explorers Club. Yeah, two places. You can find it on my website, which I've already given. That's theoldexplorer.com, or it's on. That's just the Explorers. No, www.explorers. That'll get it. I see it here now at the. You don't think about these things unless you got to think about them. So anyway, the Explorers Club is www.explorers.com, or just put the Explorers Club in your Google and it'll go right to it. and just click on events, and you'll find the talk, which is on the 24th, New York City, lecture series with Jim Okon. That's my real name, Jim Okon. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay, would this be the Explorers Clubs at www.explorers.org?
That's it.
Okay, I Googled that while you were talking, and now I'm going to paste that in the chat room.
Yes, there's actually a post with the name of the email and the telephone numbers where you can call for a reservation.
Sounds like a winner to me. A lot of people might be wanting to attend that, and where's that going to be at again?
It's on 70th Street in Big Apple, New York City. The name of the talk is Exploration and Discovery of Lost Maya Technologies, and I will be there. I will be talking about what we're talking about right now, the stuff in the book.
Well, speaking of the stuff in the book, the next thing I was going to bring up to you were the Mayan tools that you talked rather in depth about, especially their sculpting tools. They seem to be pretty high quality, didn't they?
Absolutely. And let me tell you what led me that way. I drew a blank in my own mind when I thought about Maya tools. And I was at the site of Yaxchilan in 1989 when a chap flew in to the airstrip by the name of Felipe Kleinfelter. And Felipe is a sculptor, a well-known sculptor. If you're into big sculptors, he sculpts stone, etc. And he and I were sitting around having a couple around the campfire at night, and he told me he was looking for Maya tools. And I said, God, damn, go. And I'd seen all these incredible sculptures on the facade of buildings, and just the stelae and the statues by themselves, etc. And I said, I hadn't even thought about that. It's like, gosh, because archaeology never mentions how the Maya developed these beautiful facades and carvings out of stone that was, sandstone, limestone, and andrite, which is a igneous material like granite, hard. And they actually believed that the Maya had used flint tools when the limestone was soft and could carve all these beautiful three-dimensional and delicate carvings out of this, soft material, which is, in truth, if you ever find something that's that soft, it hardens up in like 24 hours. So it would take 3 months rather than 24 hours to carve one of these elements. So Felipe started a hunt, and I joined his search and found these tools that you see in the book, the chisels and the gouges and the adzes and the axes and all the punches. They were made from jadeite. Jadeite's a material that's usually used in fine jewelry. In fact, it was lost. The source of jadeite in this country was lost for thousands of years. In fact, European geologists thought that all the jadeite they found in the Maya tombs was imported from China, which is totally ridiculous. Okay? We didn't have trade with China back 2,000 years ago, not that we know about. So in the 70s, some people found some of the mother lodes along the Montagua River in Guatemala, and this river is along a tectonic fault plate, which rubs together and develops straight out 15 miles deep and at relatively low temperature and high pressure, and it makes all colors. Well, the Maya really treasured a green and a blue color, while the black, which you saw in the book, had the same properties. It had just the same hardness, harder than iron, and tougher than steel because of this intergranular growth. And they developed methods of shaping these jadeite pieces into tools, and they had to use really tough materials to shape them. And they'd already learned before they made the tools, best we can tell, how to make really fine jewelry. And so if you make fine jewelry, then it would be just an easy step to make the jewels that could be used for carving those beautiful, otherworldly, exotic styles that we see in their book of tricks. So they were just unbelievable. And the tools, we started collecting them, and you found them in markets, you found them in museums, you found them in private collections, and people would sell them to us, so they didn't know what they were. And there you see them in the book. And archaeologists call me or email and ask me, are those real? I said, absolutely. Go to this. I tell them where Kleinfeld lives. He lives in Austin, and that's one of the biggest hotbeds of archaeology in the country at the University of Texas. Plus, we got a few other centers for research in the Maya culture, and we turned the archaeological world on its ear, not only with the bridge but with the tools that they use to make constructions, sculptures, wood carvings, anything you could dream of. And these tools were, I don't do it in the book, but I do it in this slideshow I'm putting together now, this PowerPoint. I take modern tools and compare them side by side with the Maya chisels and the Maya gouges and Maya adzes, and they're unbelievable. I picked some real good Maya stuff. I picked some modern steel tools that look very similar. I mean, that's more proof. My publisher cut about 50 pictures out of my book. I had an agreement to do 100, and they said it was their business, and I didn't need this picture. I didn't need that one. Well, one of the pictures was a comparison with modern steel chisel and the shape and the Maya chisel. So I'm glad you're interested in that, because that is a valuable part of the book.
Yeah, and you also covered the next question while you were at it about your friend who sculpts with Mayan tools.
Yes, he does. He actually, that was his hand in the photographs, sculpting and showing how some of the smaller tools were used with wooden handles or haps, and the other ones were big enough to use as a handheld chisel. And he's quite a guy.
Yeah. Now, I was going to mention also to you and my listeners that one of the things I realized while reading your book was how little I actually knew about the Maya. I mean, sure, everybody got to hear about Maya in 2012, and there's tons of material about that. But and their calendar skills, unequaled by anybody else's, if the stories are correct, which you didn't cover the calendar because you had so much other material to cover, I'm quite sure. But, I mean, yours was one of the most in-depth and most educational books for anybody that wants to know more about the Maya and how they lived day to day and, what kind of knowledge they actually had. And, you've shown in your book very clearly that it went far beyond calendar making and astronomy.
Exactly. And I make the point, when you got a bunch of really elite scientists, and let's face it, they were, okay? You had mathematicians, you had astronomers, you had people that were doing calendrics, and the scribes, the writers. And then you had the sculptors. You've developed an elite set of people that needed mansions. They needed better buildings to do their work in, et cetera. That's when technology came forward and took this cement and the tools and made these unbelievable structures, all with that basic module. Remember I showed the Maya arch as a basic module, how you could make one building, one-level buildings, or two-level buildings, or three-level buildings, or circular buildings by rotating it around an arch, or maybe a pyramid with the temples on top and with the roof combs. All of this was done, and it sort of was spawned by the brilliant logic of the elite. And then, of course, you get these are elite people that were working on science, and had to have somebody that was the king. He wanted better buildings. He wanted palaces. And there was always the religious guys, so they had a lot of temples and stuff like that. So before you know it, you had a city. And that's how those city-states got, so many got developed. And they were like, not only, one of the big things that I make a deal about in the book is archaeologists, and they're starting to do this more and more to be aware, didn't realize that the Maya were such great traders, and it was big business. It ran each individual city-state. They made something or mined something or had some kind of a special trade good that they could trade with not only other city-states, but outside. They had these big canoes, these cargo canoes that were 60 feet long that they could carry 24 tons of equipment, of trade goods down the coast all the way out across the Caribbean to the islands and down the coast of Central America and up north to Mexico. Well, they called northern Mesoamerica, Mexico. That's where the Aztecs developed eventually. And I say eventually, they didn't come around until 300 years after the Maya collapsed. So there was no parallel civilization. The Maya still existed when the Aztec came, but they were living back in small villages, and they were still a bunch of tough guys. They were still able to write. They could write and keep their books up right until the time that the conquistadors came. They were literate scribes and intelligentsia. They could read the writing and copy the books. These are paper books. It's like if they were from the period during the collapse, it would have been 600 years old when the conquistadors came. So they copied them. They were made out of a paper made out of a bark from a fig tree. But most people don't know, and I just have barely mentioned this, there's so much, that the last Maya citadel, the last city fell in 1697, which is 150 years after the Maya states in the northern part of the Yucatan fell. They were independent until 1697. And that links us, the Americans, the United States of America, right to them, because at that time we were a colony of England. Harvard was already 63 years old. Yale was going to be, started in 7 years. I'm going, this is amazing. We are connected. And they're part of us. We're part of them.
That's interesting. Now, I was also going to ask you.
Makes you think.
Pardon me?
Makes you think. I said it makes you think.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to ask you, though, don't you have another show to do after this one?
Yes.
Would you like to tell my listeners about this show so they'll know where to go catch it at? And when?
Well, I'm really sorry for being caught off guard with you, but it's Lillian Caldwell. And I just have her name down here on my schedule. And I'm sure you could
Google it.
You could Google that. She will come up, because everybody that, like yourself, you're easy to find, Joyce. And I do not know, you've been really good, and you've asked really good questions, and they've been about the Maya and their technology. You haven't asked me once about extraterrestrials coming in and coaching them how to do math, or, what's going to happen on 2012. No, that's this year, on December 21st. That's good, too, because you may not like my answers, because they're not what what I call the woo-woo people expecting. The Maya, the current Maya living in the Yucatan, just think it's another day, and they look at it as a great tourist opportunity. Millions are coming down to the Yucatan, to the ruins, and they're going to be there on the 21st when they wake up, and I don't know what they expect, but they're only going to have, this is what I tell people, they're only going to have 4 more shopping days till Christmas. Well, people laugh at that, because they have no other concerns that there's something bad's going to happen today. In fact, they've only found the date twice. One at a place called Tortuguera, and recently at El Corona in Mexico. No, that was Guatemala, El Corona. The last one, the person says, on this date, which is 21st of September, he shall come down and get dressed. Well, he is a minor god. Well, there's nothing else in the cella except that, because the rest was decayed. Well, we didn't. He's getting dressed for a party or what? Because that is, by the way, the 21st of December is New Year's for the Maya. That's the night for a party. And the last one, which was found at La Corona only a few months ago by Stewart, was a king from Tikal who was writing after a recent defeat that this will not stop us from being a realm that will live the period, which is, the 13.13.0, which is the end of that calendar round. And after that, we start all over again. Just like we did in 1999 turned into 2000.
So that's sort of like a new millennium for them. But, I didn't really need to ask you about that because it was in your book when I read it, where you stood on it already. So.
Well, I'm thanking you.
But what time is your next show?
That's at 9:30.
9:30 in Eastern time. So you're like an hour ahead of me. So you got about another almost hour before your next show starts, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't want to hold you up and get you in trouble with that host.
No, man. Listen, I enjoy this. I mean, you ask really good questions. Some people call me and they won't even have the book and they hadn't read it, and they've got to search for questions. So, thank you for reading my book.
Oh, you're welcome. I really enjoyed it. It was very educational. As I do have some interest in the Maya myself, and it really did me a lot of good to see there was a lot more to them than just the calendars and the, astronomy, because I was like, that doesn't make any sense that they'd have such advanced in this and nothing else.
Exactly. You see their cities. They're beautiful, car facades and graceful palaces that have been restored, or not restored, but they call them consolidated. They put together as many pieces as they could find to make it look like it was before, and they've done a great job. And these were elegant places, and they were first class. But they had to get there. Not some bureaucrat couldn't carve that carving or build that building or build that road. That's something we talked about. The roads that went straight through the jungle, paved, 30 feet wide. I mean, these are the best roads in the world until we built our interstate highway system and the Autobahn. I'll throw the Autobahn in too. They were thousands of miles of these roads. In 1910, I always ask people this question because 1910, the United States only had 114 miles of road paved. Okay. That's not much. And they were way ahead of their time.
I know here in Houston, it takes them forever to build a road. You had no idea how long it took them to finish building 610 all the way through. That was years.
Well, here in Atlanta, they got I-75 and I-85 merging downtown, and every few years they finish and they start at the other end. I'm so good. It's amazing. I mean, when I got out of school, Georgia Tech back in 1960, I went to work for what was called the Highway Department in those days. It's called the Department of Transportation now. And I started working on the first round of downtown superhighways. And then the second round came around in the 80s. And now we're widening those roads and building wider bridges, and it just keeps on. Hey, and you look and the roads are crowded. I took a cab from the Hyde downtown Houston 2 weeks ago and went in that single lane down the middle, that express lane. So it scared me, but that was a good idea. I really was. The day I saw the construction's still going on.
Okay. Well, listen.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought you'd finished there. I apologize.
I was going to start. So I see it's a minute till the hour, so you're going to want to be signing off.
Right. Well, before we do, real quick, I was going to say that on page 133, I saw a picture of one of the Maya houses, and Well, I got kind of surprised by the picture because reading your descriptions of their technology and their buildings and concrete highways, I would have expected a picture of at least like a log cabin or, something more modern than that. And I was wondering, why do you suppose they didn't have something better in the way of residences?
Well, this very house you see here was the house that they had. This is called a N-A, back before they developed these beautiful buildings and this Maya arch. But if you look at the cross section of the building with straight sides and it's sort of an arched top that's covered with thatch, it's palm or grass, it's the same structure that they actually build out of stone. And it worked. They figured this worked. It's like you've seen Egyptian architecture. The columns go up and they got like flowers at the top that sort of, seem to meld with the ceiling. Those are actually copies of the thatch columns they used to use that actually took root after the trees, the limbs that they used took root and had branches growing out of them, and they were sort of pretty, I guess, they figured, and they copied them in their architecture. And here, this house is still used throughout the Maya area in some areas. But look at the sides, okay? We've got vertical sides that allows air to blow through, and the door is generally open, and the roof is very easy to build because they have hurricanes there, which we know about. And this house, if it blows down, and it's very light, it doesn't really, not many of these actually blow down in a hurricane, but they're easily replaced. So there was a lot of thought going in, thousands of years of thought going into this instead of building a stone house with a timber roof, because they had plenty of timber around. They could have made, and plenty of stone, because the whole area was covered with
yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I think they also had the ability to make brick if they could make concrete, right?
Yes, there's one site called Cocamacho that is really bizarre. It's the only place in all the Maya zone that uses brick. And they use brick for all their buildings, their temples, their pyramids, and everything. That's the brick. Because they had a lot of clay there. Now, they didn't have a lot of clay in the other part of the Yucatan. The soil you see in that photograph is only about 3 feet to 4 feet deep. Below that is limestone down 3,500, 4,000 feet to the next strata, another material. So they didn't have much clay to make bricks out of in this area, in the general part, but they did to the north towards Comacacho. So they did make brick.
Okay. Now,
a lot of mysteries about that too.
I was also thinking, did they have actual contracting crews that would come out and build homes for hire?
That is another good question. Construction was one of the biggest industries, and these buildings were built out of stones. People say, well, how did they move those big stones? Well, they didn't use big stones. If you look at the buildings I took all the photographs, by the way, and I'm really proud that I've gotten a lot of credit for them. So you see the stones are not real big. They're like 120, 125 pounds a piece. That's what one man could carry in a load on a tump line. And the backpack that was the sort of head strap device that was the main cargo carrier. And they would have a central area like a plant where they would make the blocks and make the decorations for the buildings, and they would ship these by carrying them by porters from the plant to the city or town that was going to build a building, and they'd lay them out on the ground. And there's been some sites opened up where there was actually, they stopped work. I don't know if it was a strike or it was an attack or the thirst finally got them. Well, the facade is laid out on the ground, ready to put up on the structure. So they made these buildings in a prefabricated manner and put them together on the site after being constructed in some central shop area. They did that.
So they kind of had their regular construction crews.
Yes, sir. They did. And there were specialists that did that. And a lot of the work was done by impressed labor. You paid your taxes by working on a project like the road or a temple or something like that needed to be built. And you would work so many days or months to do your share. And we'd have some supervisor that would, most of the work that was needed to be done was carrying these stones from the plant to the site. And they didn't have to be stonemasons, but just helpers.
Well, that was pretty handy.
Yes.
Well, if you were to venture a guess, how would you say the Mayan attained such high technological knowledge?
How did they attain it?
Yes, sir.
Practice. No, I'm not being funny. Practice. They had plenty of time. They had 3,000 years. Look what we've done in 200 and what we got now, 35 years. That's it. Those 7 years. Okay. The United States has come from horseback to Mars. Okay, and we've been at Mars a long time. It's been almost 50 years since we walked on the moon. So just think we had 2,000 years to work with before we had what was declared the classic period, which was 900 years long, which is 3 times the length I'm talking about the United States having. They had the same intellectual motivation to solve where are we going to get the tools? We don't have any iron. How are we going to carry stuff because we don't have a wheel? We don't have any beasts of burden. We have the wheel, but not beasts of burden. How are we going to build without cement? Blah, blah, blah. All these things came out of this thought process. The same thought process that developed the mathematics and the astronomy and the calendrics and the writing.
It was a case of necessity is the mother of invention.
There was more necessity for getting water, agriculture, building materials than it was for, figuring out mathematical problems. Not that it wasn't important. It was, you had to be a special type person to want to be like now. Special people being mathematicians.
Yeah, that is true. Now, what is a Sacbe? S-A-C-B-E. Sacbe. Yeah.
That's a word that means white earth in Maya. The cement, the white roads, not white earth. The roads were made with cement that was made through the process we talked about. And the cement was used to pave the roads. And the roads were white. And this was great because they were, elevated above the jungle floor, 30 feet wide, real concrete. In some places, still lasting. Okay, and it was white and had a crown on it that acted as a drainage surface when it rained. But this white surface allowed a 24-hour roadway. It was white, so it reflected moonlight, it reflected starlight, so the porters and travelers could travel during the night as well as the day. So they were called white roads, Sacbes. And the plural is Sacbeab. As you listen to Meyer for the night.
They sound like a very clever people.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that you were really appreciative of where the Mayas are concerned, at least that's the way I took it reading your book, was the fact that they didn't have to use dray animals. Can you tell us, the listeners, a little something about the benefits of not having to do that?
Well, first of all, they didn't have dray animals because there were none available. The horse and the camel actually were from North America. They were actually, they were derived from this area as far as their evolution. And there was 2 herds. One went north over the Bering Land Bridge into Siberia, where they were domesticated and turned into the power for all the kingdoms, the Romans and the Egyptians, etc. And the southern herd stayed in North America and Central America. Something happened. It's called the Halcyon extinction. We lost all our big animals. I mean, mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, ground sloths, horses, and animals. Something happened, and nobody knows what it is, but it was some kind of a event that caused all the big animals to die. It wasn't man. There was more animals than man. Man couldn't kill off all those animals. Anyway, we wound up, we being North America, South America, etc., not having any beasts of burden. And so the Maya had to make do. They didn't even know a beast of burden existed. And when it came time to figure out how to carry loads and how to build buildings and how to just transport anything, they had to use their own brain power and their own kinetic energy. They developed this head-strapped and backpack system called the tump line. Now, other cultures have the tump line, but it was like what's called comparative studies in archaeology. That it was time to invent that thing, and they invented it, and they were able to carry 125 pounds of their own weight with they were able to carry their load. That term is from the mule teams days out west, 22 mule team Borax and stuff like that. The way you figured how many horses or mules you needed in a team was you figured the load and you divided the weight of the horses into it, which is like 2,000 pounds, and that was how many horses you need, so they could carry their own load. And so the Maya could figure that out too, and they would do it with a backpack. And now, using a backpack, they didn't need grain to feed the animals. They didn't need to concentrate energy to pasture or groom or water the animals. The men grew their own food, and they watered themselves and they groomed themselves. And they didn't need that part of the economy to go into labor for taking care of animals. And the other thing is they didn't need to use their very valuable grain surplus. They had a surplus. This is what made them rich, because they could trade it to other parts of the Maya realm. And a real comparison with what happens is when the United States went from animals, mules and horses, etc., in the 20s and 30s, and we went from having to feed horses into having to buy gasoline, 40 million acres of farmland went from grain into food for human beings, which boosted the economy tremendously because we became, export nation for food. The Maya would have been the other way around. They would have taken 40% of their grain, which was their total surplus, and maybe they had three buckets. They had the grain it took to feed the farmers, the surplus to feed the city people, the scientists and the elitists and the priests and all the other people living in the city because they couldn't farm because they were all city workers, and we had the trade. Well, they would have devoured the trade and part of their elite feed, and that would have really messed everything up because it would have just, in the supply and demand that they lived by in trade, that would have really screwed everything up. So that was a good question.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting when I read about it. Is there anything that you would like to, tell my listeners about that I maybe didn't think to cover?
No, you covered it all. I'm really pleased.
Okay. Well, did you have any last minute thoughts for everybody?
Yes, I'd like everybody to buy a book. And you could order it online at Amazon. It stays in the top 100 ranked. Sometimes it's in the top 10, and sometimes, like today, it's in the 50s. But as long as I'm in the top 100, that means that books are selling. And buy a book, and the pictures are great. The drawings by me also are great, and I'm really proud of it.
It's an excellent book. I read it myself, folks, and he's got some really nice pictures in there, too. Also, if you scroll down, you'll see his... Hang on a second, please. Pardon me, I caught a little frog in my throat all of a sudden there, and I had to kind of get rid of it. At any rate, you can see his description for this show and his picture and a link to his website, as well as the fact I've been posting them in the chat room periodically. But if you look at the bottom of that description, you'll see I got a link to his book. And if y'all click on it here to get to Amazon, I get a commission on that, and I don't mind putting a shameless plug in every now and then since I don't charge for the show. If you're interested, you want to buy it, get to it from here. It's just as good as you can going directly to Amazon. And in fact, it goes directly to the book. Also, tomorrow, or the next day, I'll be moving him, actually tomorrow, into the archives section to make room for the show I got coming up tomorrow evening, which is the unfoldment with Neil Kramer. I hope everybody will come for that. But he will be in the archive from then on. Also, James, I'm going to be posting this show with your picture and mine to YouTube, to Media Cafe, and to Daily Motion, and I'll be sending you links to that and to where I posted in my own website.
Excellent.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to go ahead and call that one a wrap. We've been on here a little bit over an hour, and I'd like you to have a little time to prepare for your show.
Thank you.
I need to take care of some business myself, but it's been a real pleasure having you, and I want you to have...
Again.
I was about to say, I want you to have an open door invitation to contact me if you ever want to be on the show, or like you just invited me, I can always contact you.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. So, put me in a list to call back.
Okay, we'll do it.
Thank
you have
you,
a
sir.
good one.
I shall. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Okay.